welcome to the Misophonia Podcast. This is Season 4, Episode 23. My name is Adil Ahmad, and I have Misophonia. Hey, we're getting close to the end of Season 4, though there are several amazing episodes coming up to take us into the fall and into Season 5. Hit me up if you're interested in coming on the show at hello@misophoniapodcast.com or check the website, misophoniapodcast.com, for links to the calendar. I'll be posting on social media as soon as dates start to open up. Today, I'm speaking with a very talented pianist, Alexandra, who is getting a graduate degree in piano performance. I thought this was really interesting for many reasons, not the least because it must be challenging to be on stage performing at such a high level when a trigger could really come from anywhere. We also talk about how she finally sought out treatment after a very difficult time early in quarantine, and how life has been since then. Oh, and I should remind you all that our social media is Misophonia Podcast on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, and Misophonia Show on Twitter. All right, now let's get to my conversation with Alexandra. Alexandra, welcome to the podcast. Good to have you.
Thank you.
Cool. Well, I'd love to just always get to know where people are located.
Right. So I'm in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm a student
cool.
here at UW-Madison.
UW-Madison. Okay. Yeah, I'm just a state away over in St. Paul. Can I ask what you're studying at UW?
I am piano performance major. I'm doing my master's here.
Oh, excellent. Okay. I've had a number of musicians on recently, actually. So that's
interesting.
that's pretty cool. And I guess how is it? I mean, musicians are very attuned to sound. I'm curious how it is in an environment like school where it also probably gets a bit intense because you have exams, you got to concentrate and focus. How's it? Well, I guess you're in your master's, so it's you've been in school for a few years. How's it been this year, especially with that pandemic stuff going on?
It's been a crazy year, just trying to adjust to online learning as a musician. That doesn't work very well.
No.
So just like online lessons, online ensembles, it's been an adjustment, but I've learned a lot, I've grown a lot, and it's been good. So I'm looking forward to going back to normal, though.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, I'm just imagining trying to do gigantic recitals on a concert piano, but not really doing it all remotely.
Right.
Are you okay? So yes, you're doing everything remotely. So I guess you're just in your apartment or your house or something, just banging on the piano and doing it.
At the beginning of all this, yes, I was stuck at home with my piano. Luckily, we have access to our practice rooms now at school, so that's been helpful. I've been able to come to school for that and get out of the house a little bit.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. And at home, are you living with anybody, or how's that kind of been, being kind of trapped at home?
Yep. So last year I was with my parents in Texas. This year I've got a fellow musician roommate. We've got an apartment. She plays the flute, and we get along really well. So that's been good for being stuck at home with each other.
Yeah. Well, at least you got amazing music to listen to live.
Yeah.
Is she aware of your misophonia at all? Because flute, there's a lot of mouth sounds. I'm just curious if how that dynamic has been.
So she is aware. She doesn't really understand what it is, which is pretty common with people. Luckily, she practices in her room with the door shut, so I don't have to deal with any of the noise other than actual playing. And I've actually, when I moved in with her, I'd been in treatment for misophonia for quite a while, so I didn't have too many issues with her up to this point. It was mostly back when I was at home with my family that was a challenge.
Yeah, no, we definitely know all about the family challenges.
Yeah.
So you were, maybe tell me about a little bit about your this treatment. What was that all about?
Yeah, so kind of go back to the start of the isolation. We were in quarantine. I've had misophonia my whole life, but I didn't really know what it was. But when we were all stuck together at home for weeks at a time, it really got bad. And I really just had a mental breakdown. I just couldn't handle it anymore. Dealing with the sounds 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so I decided I needed to look this up and see if I could get some help. And I found Tom Dozier online. He specializes in misophonia through behavioral therapy. And he has been a lifesaver, just working with him and understanding what it is that triggers me. And so working with him has been great.
Yeah, I had Tom on a few weeks ago, I guess, and
Oh, yeah. He's
also
actually the one
recently
that
had.
recommended this podcast. So,
Oh, gotcha. Okay, okay. Yeah, I had one of his other um, clients on a couple weeks ago, and I guess he'd recommended her as well, Audrey. Actually, yeah, last week. So, anyways, I digress. But okay, okay. So right, so he was saying something about how he tries to figure out the physical response, and was that what he was kind of doing remotely and trying to figure out how to quell that?
right. Yeah. So, the very first session I had with him, we just did a couple exercises, mindfulness exercises, to help me figure out what happened physically to my body when I heard a trigger, which is not an aspect of my issue that I'd ever thought of before. You really pay more attention to the emotional, the freak out that
Right.
happens. And we figured out that my triggers made me clench my jaw like a lot. And so just just figuring that out, just that one little thing was a lifesaver. Like it's not, I'm not an alien from outer space. And because it was tangible, something that I knew I was doing, then it made it seem possible to make it stop. Emotions are so hard to deal with, especially when you're dealing with those triggers. It's like there's no way I can make that stop. But clenching my jaw, I can totally stop doing that. So it really made it approachable and less scary.
I see. So once you found out what your particular physical response was, then that made you're saying that made you able to kind of like um, maybe be more aware of that physical response, and then just focus on not doing it next time you were triggered.
Right. And it's a process. I had to learn to retrain my reflexes so that when I hear a sound, that I don't do that anymore. Kind of like stopping a bad habit.
Right. But and then do you the kind of the fight or flight kind of sensation, which is a little bit more seems a little bit more mental. Did that go down? Did that change as well, or is that kind of sensation still there?
Yeah. So over time, it's gone down. It's still, if I've had a bad day and I'm super stressed, that's something that's still present and I have to deal with kind of separately. But the more I've gotten that involuntary reflex under control, the less those emotions have been an issue. They're really connected to each other. And I've actually noticed, if I'm in a situation where I'm hearing triggers, I feel that fight or flight response coming on, and then my automatic response now is, oh, I need to make sure I'm relaxed, and then that kind of goes away.
So okay, so you're saying when you now when you hear triggers, you
Yes,
first go to you add you try to you kind of add a step where you're telling yourself to relax a bit between
exactly. Yeah,
the trigger and the reaction. I see. The other interesting thing is like I've heard people say that when they hear a trigger, it's kind of like it's kind of like a shock. It's kind of like glass breaking where it's not
mm,
expected. But are you somehow still able to kind of like intercept that? Because that's kind of
right.
the hard part. Is like, oh
Yeah,
my god,
yeah,
it's like yeah,
yeah, for sure. Before I started working on it, and even as I was working on it, that was the case. I didn't. There was no warning. It was just, I'm triggered. I have to go. But as I've become more aware of what's going on in my mind and in my body when I am triggered, I have been able to learn to anticipate that a little bit, uh, and be able to stop it before it gets bad. Also, my triggers tend to be more gradual noises like chewing
Hmm.
or sneezing, and so those are like, you can kind of anticipate when those things are going to happen, and that gives me time to kind of prepare and
Probably at mealtime
yes,
for the
yeah, when it's
chewings.
time for
Yeah.
dinner, it's time to relax my jaw and take a deep
Probably
breath.
allergy season for sneezes. And yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So interesting. Okay, so you had this experience, I guess, early in lockdown. You had a bit of a breakdown, sought out treatment, and so did you notice things get better pretty quickly around your family, or did it eventually start to like? Have you gone back basically maybe to your family and have noticed that's actually improved there? Um, like, have you been tested at the original, kind of the original
The
source?
original source. So actually, just after one or two sessions with Mr. Dozier, my trigger severity went down drastically, uh,
Mm.
which was like amazing. It was a miracle, really. Um, and yeah, so with my family, it's definitely still the hardest environment for me to control my triggers. I think because that was, the original source of them, and there's a lot of just emotions attached to that environment. But it's better. I think it will continue to get better over time.
What
Uh,
did they say, about this as you were, as you going through experiences last, you know, early lockdown?
yeah, so the hardest thing with, um, they don't, misophonia is not widely known. And many of my family members just thought I was going crazy. Like being picky, you just stressed out from being locked up. They don't really believe that it's a real physical, mental issue. Um, Luckily, my mother took psychology in college, so she had a little bit of a more open mind as far as that was concerned. She's actually the one who found Mr. Dozier online for me. Um, and they've just been super supportive once they understood what it was, that it wasn't something I could help. They were really supportive, and really invested in what I was doing, asking what was going on, how I was doing, helping me with trigger tamer exercises. My brother was the best. He would come out with his breakfast and he'd be like, "Do you want me to eat this over here so you can practice?" He was great. And that was really important, having that support during those first couple weeks for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And well, then again, let's maybe go back to kind of our early days with your family. Like, how did was it a kind of a typical onset around preteen kind of things and dealing with eating sounds around the table?
Yep. I have a very vivid memory of the first time I really realized like the severity of my trigger. I was about 11 or 12 years old, and I was doing schoolwork at the table, and my sister was eating an apple. And I just remember all of a sudden being like, I cannot stand it. If she takes another bite of that apple, I'm going to lose it. Um, and it was kind of a scary thing. Like it wasn't something I'd noticed before, and all of a sudden it's like I can't stand being around my family when we eat, which is something so normal that you do as a family. And it kind of steadily got worse from there. The more we were together, we lived in an RV for 3 years shortly after that, and
Okay.
that was extra difficult. In an RV trailer, you're stuck very close together, and I didn't really have an escape route, and that was very difficult and eye opening when I realized, this isn't nobody else is bothered by this. This is just me, that can't stand being at the dinner table, um, which is kind of like the start to me realizing maybe there's something not quite right with me, like, um, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, we definitely all grew up feeling that because it didn't have a name. and
Right. Yes.
it's we are approaching that kind of teen years where we're all like bombarded with messages that you're gonna be weird, you're gonna
Yeah.
everything's awkward, so
Exactly.
you're gonna
Yeah.
hate everything, and so that it's just we're just assume that it's part of that part of that
Yeah.
experience, and that's probably what your I'm assuming what your family thought as well, is that you're
Yeah.
just becoming like
Yeah.
a yeah,
Yeah.
that
Just
it's kind of
writing it
like a
off. So
quirk. Yeah,
she's in a bad mood today. She's just being stuck up or whatever, and it's frustrating because we know that's not what's going on, but we can't explain it to people because we don't understand what's going on
yeah.
exactly.
So did your sister took a bite of that fateful apple, and
Yes.
but was that like a she must have eaten apples before. I'm just
All the
curious,
time. Yeah.
have you ever thought of yeah, have you ever thought about what happened that day, or was it is something just got activated subconsciously, you think, that just one
I'm
day
not.
it just
I've
became
thought
yeah.
back to that a lot. Yeah, and I'm not sure. It was a long time ago.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure that I experienced those sensations before. I think that was just the moment when it kind of peaked. And I'm not sure.
So you have a couple siblings and a couple parents. So it doesn't seem like there have been other symptoms of misophonia in your family. It's just been you.
Just me. Yep.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
at least that they've told me.
Yeah. Did they ever like were you ever like teased and stuff at in the family? Or
Yeah.
was it just kind of like it's a quirk?
um, at first I didn't really. I'm a very quiet person, even around my family, so I didn't really express my frustration all the time,
Mm,
especially when you realize nobody else is experiencing that. You kind
yeah.
of keep it to yourself.
So
Um,
you weren't throwing things or anything. It was pretty.
no, no, not that bad. I would
Yeah.
usually go off on my own and decompress privately. The last couple of years, one or two of my siblings just they I think they were frustrated that I would get annoyed around them, and they didn't understand why I would be so upset around them, and so that kind of became a point of tension between us.
Mm.
Like, why don't you want to be around me? I can't explain that. Like, I can't tell you that I can't stand the noises you make. So that was difficult for a couple of years there.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So you're. This was the couple of years that you're that there was some tension that was in like during school, during high school, probably like soon after you started to notice misophonia, or was it
Yeah, yeah.
recently? Okay.
I really the tension between me and my siblings started mostly when we were in that RV,
Oh
stuck
yeah.
together all the time. There's no
I mean,
escape.
being in a
And we
car
really
is
had to deal.
hell, and I can't imagine like right being in a RV 24/7. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
did it start to? So it caused tension there. Do you feel like? Well, do you feel like it maybe contributed a little bit to you kind of introvertedness? I mean that kind of sometimes comes up with folks is like or maybe it's hard to tell what's the chicken or the egg if there's even a connection. But
Mm.
do you think that kind of had kind of a lasting effect on kind of who you've how you've developed as a person?
I think it did for sure. I am very introverted. I don't like crowds um, because it's very overstimulating for me. And I don't know if that's directly because of my triggers or if it's just like an added thing.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm naturally introverted and that was just a convenient excuse. I don't know.
Right.
But I know, like, if I'm going somewhere and I know there's going to be food, there's an added layer of anxiety there
Hmm.
because that is one of my triggers. So yeah,
Do
for
you,
sure. I think
did you ever get did you ever get diagnosed maybe for these other kind of comorbidities like anxiety and OCD that also kind of comes up fairly often as well that there are
right.
similar issues.
I've never been officially diagnosed with anxiety. I've always just been a little bit socially anxious, a little bit
Hmm.
shy. Um, Not to the point where I felt that I needed to go and get diagnosed for it. I can function in a social situation when I have
Yeah.
to.
Right.
Um,
Right. Yeah. I think you're probably more like me there. Um, What about and what about with those the I guess relationships with your family? Did you have you found that has kind of are you guys kind of like fine now, or do you find that the misophonia kind of caused barriers or distance between yourself and any of your family members that were kind of lasting?
I think it could have, if I had gone too much longer without figuring out what was going
Mm,
on. Um, but like I mentioned, they were so supportive. Once I came to them and was like, look, I found out what this is, what's going on. And it's actually something that I need to work on. They were really quick to just rally around that and forgive and forget and just help me move on, which was really a major part of me getting over kind of the trauma there, you know.
yeah, and that was that the thing last year, or was that? Did you find out it had a name like sometime before that?
I actually found out about misophonia as a thing, two or about 2 years before I really thought about doing anything about it. It was something I read about. I was like, oh, that's interesting. But it took me a while to figure out, like, oh, maybe that's me, like,
Hmm.
to really delve into it and connect myself to it. Um, I think the first time I came across it was just some like meme on Facebook, and I was like, "Did you know this was a thing?" And
Right.
it's not something you really think about at the time because you're just scrolling through. But
Some memes
yeah,
are useful like that, so it's
yeah, that's true. Planted a seed in the back of my head, which was good.
yeah. Well, how about with friends, kind of social life? Well, you said you're kind of introverted, but I'm curious about how that's kind of shaped certain friendships growing up and now. Like, is it something that a lot of your friends know about? Do you even bother to tell people?
Yeah, I don't. My roommate, I think, is my only friend that really knows. It's just something that I don't like to bring up because then all the questions come, and then
Hmm.
you have to explain it, and it's a little bit of a mess. I don't like being in groups, like I mentioned, so I really only have a couple really close friends, and when we hang out, it's one on one. So it really just hasn't been an issue.
Hmm. Yeah, I love how you described it. It just ends up being kind of a mess, and that's
Yeah,
really yeah. That's one reason why yeah, especially as you get older, it's like, do I really want to like bother? Like, do I really want to play with the probability that it's going to be like question after question, and then even at the end of
exactly,
that journey, it's like a shrug of the shoulders, and then it just
exactly.
more
Yeah,
triggers. So
yeah.
I do want to talk about music. I mean, do you think it affected your I don't know, your appreciation decision to pursue music, or do you use music as a so many questions? Do you use music as kind of therapy as well? Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. So I don't know if it got me into music. My mom played the piano. I would listen to her teaching her students, and I would sit in the other room and copy what her students were playing on the other
Oh, free
piano.
lessons. I love it. Yeah.
Free lessons, yeah. And it's just something that I was always drawn to, um, even before misophonia was an issue. As misophonia became more of an issue, I think I definitely did use music as kind of a retreat. And, if somebody's eating on the other side of the room and I'm pounding away at the piano, I can't hear that.
Hmm.
And so it definitely kind of became a way for me to drown things out. And
You bang on the Rachmaninoff
exactly,
concertos.
yeah.
And it's
Um,
right.
and it brought me peace and joy. And so, after a bad day full of triggers, that was something I could do to decompress. Um, so it was definitely a therapeutic treat.
Yeah, absolutely. And so now you've pursued it as kind of, you're doing a master's in music performance?
Yep,
Is
that's correct.
Okay, cool. And did you do that also for your undergrad?
Yep, I've got a bachelor's in music performance from Texas A&M,
Oh,
and this
excellent.
is
Yeah.
kind of the natural next step.
Right, right. So what do you plan to do? Be like a concert pianist, to teach, join a band?
I love performing. Unfortunately, that is not something you really
Yeah,
can make a living off of.
right.
So I'm going for the a higher degree so that hopefully I can teach at a university at some point.
Yeah.
So I can support my performing aspirations with that income. Um, but yeah, that's the goal is ultimately education.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. So I guess yeah. So we talked about kind of your friends. Has it kind of shown up in and I don't mean to pry, but about like in terms of like relationships maybe. Have you has it kind of been an issue that's ever popped up there?
So I've never actually been in a committed relationship, but I think it's definitely been a bit of a barrier, though. It's when you're with someone constantly, you start to pick up on those little things like the sounds they make when they eat, and snoring is a big one for me. So,
Right.
um, it's something I've thought about a lot. Like at some point when I do want that in my life, it's going to be something I have to deal with for sure. Um, and before I started, really focusing on my treatment options, that was very scary for me. Like, I don't know, I'm going to die alone, basically, because I can't deal with this on a long term basis.
Yeah,
But
there are those
now that I've,
questions, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Have you noticed one reason for that people kind of wonder about that is as they kind of get into adulthood, they notice that all their triggers start just kind of increasing. The number of types of triggers just increase, and then there's the visual triggers. Are you noticing that as well? Like visual triggers creeping in, and just generally the palette of triggers increasing.
Yes, yeah, I definitely the last couple of years it's really escalated. It really used to just be chewing, and then it was seeing someone in the kitchen getting ready to eat, and
Yeah,
then it kind of went into sneezing and sniffing and other things like that. And I think it's kind of goes back to that physical response. Once you learn to react to one thing with that response, then it kind of becomes natural to start reacting to other stressful things the
hmm
same way. And it kind of becomes this awful snowball effect. And the more triggers you have, the more you gain. It's really
right.
awful.
And before, at least before the treatment that you with Tom, were you doing the usual things like headphones and earphones, or I'm just curious about what were some of your coping mechanisms, or just running as fast as you can?
Mostly it was retreat. I'm very much a
Yeah,
conflict avoider. So I would just try to finish whatever I was doing as quickly as possible and retreat to the solitude of my own
yeah,
room. Um, or like I would strategize, like we were eating dinner. So I would save my like crunchy salad back so that I could use that. Because when I'm chewing something myself, I can't hear other people chewing. So I
yep,
would strategize the way I ate my meal to be able to drown things out. And you just kind of learn these little tricks. But yeah, headphones actually never occurred to me until I started working with Tom. I don't know why. That would have been a really easy solution.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
um,
Yeah. And have you ever had a job that had you in any kind of like an office environment, or something at
um,
school?
yeah, I worked as basically a teaching assistant in my
Mm-hmm.
undergrad for a while. And we had a kind of a big room where all the teaching assistants would get together to prepare for whatever. And a lot of people would take that as a lunch break or a snack break. So that was always a challenge for me to
Yeah,
focus on my own work when my coworker is chewing Doritos right next to me.
yeah,
So that was a challenge. I just kind of, again, conflict avoider. I scheduled my day so that I would be in there when there weren't a lot of people in there,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
um, just to deal with that. But yeah, that was a challenge for sure.
Yeah, I mean, just performing too. I find that if some people for some reason save all their coughs for when they're
Yes.
in an audience, and
Yep.
so I'm curious, like your whole livelihood, your whole kind of a lot of your life rides on being able to focus on your work alone on stage with like thousands of people watching you. I mean, not thousands yet, but I'm sure eventually. Has that ever caused a problem where you I don't know, maybe you uh, got up and yelled at somebody during performance,
Not quite, but I
or
want to.
dramatically shut the lid on the grand piano and stormed out? Oh, I would love to see that.
Yes, yeah, for sure. Especially, you go on stage, the first thing you're doing is just trying to get into that mental place where you can perform. And that, of course, is when everybody decides to sneeze and sniff, and you get that all
Yeah.
done. And that has very much been, it still is a challenge for me trying to shut out those noises while I'm trying to get in the zone. Uh, it's been so long since I've performed now live. I'm not
Mm.
sure if that's better. I'm looking forward to testing that out and hopefully in the near future. But for sure, that's probably one of the most challenging parts about my professional life is the performance environment.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. And then well, at least with the visual triggers, you can just stare at your keys and
Yes, you
at
don't
least
have to
at
look
least
at the
avoid
audience. Thank
that.
goodness.
Right. 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 Very cool. And while you've been in school, have you ever been able to ask for like accommodations in any way? Like, can we have less people in the room while I'm doing my
Right.
recital or something like that?
It never occurred to me. Again, it was just something like something wrong with me. I need to deal with it kind of mentality. So it never occurred to me to ask for special treatment for those situations.
Yeah.
Uh,
Have you ever met other misophones at all? I know there's some schools that are now doing like support groups for misophones. I'm curious if you've ever bumped into any,
yeah,
whether it's school or otherwise.
I have never in person met any fellow misophones. Um, I am part of a Facebook group, and I've read stories online, but I have not personally met anyone who at least admits to it.
Yeah. So is this kind of maybe your first one of your first verbal conversations with an actual misophone?
Yep, yes, it is.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah. Yeah, you're not the first one. There's quite a few people like it's the first time they've talked to somebody.
Yeah,
Um and so yeah, that's
yeah.
interesting.
And I definitely
Uh
think that goes back to like we don't like to bring it up, and so maybe we do
yeah,
know phones, but we're not talking about it because it's just not something we like to do.
right, right. I think I just need to wear more t-shirts or something. I'm sure I'll find it.
Right?
It's funny. As a joke, like there are the Facebook groups, but they tend to be very ranty,
Yeah,
and so they're not
yeah.
the most useful, which is one reason I started this. But almost as a joke, I started a next door group in my neighborhood for for misophonia, and I have
Right?
like 20 people on there. And I was like, I totally forgot about it. One day I logged in, there's like 20 people in there and talking about misophonia. I'm like, wow, okay, this is definitely more prevalent than we think. So I
Right.
know we've
Yeah.
got to find ways to to find each other, raise awareness.
Yes.
So
I think that's great. Yeah, I think there's definitely been a lot of movement for awareness. And I think it's one of those things where you have it for so long, you start to think it's just a normal part of your life, and it doesn't occur to you that there might be other people like that until you start to see these Facebook groups and things. So I think it's been great seeing this increase in awareness and education. I think it's really helpful.
yeah, very cool. Is there anything you want to tell people? I know you don't know any other other misophones, but there are a lot of people like you. So and yeah, I'm just curious if you have anything else you want to share with folks, or even just ask me maybe.
I think I just don't be afraid to ask for help. I think that's the biggest thing. If I had asked for help a lot earlier, life would have been easier. It's not something you need to be ashamed of. And I think that's the biggest message and the most important one.
Yeah, the shame and guilt stuff comes up a lot. And
A
yeah,
lot.
we
Yeah.
all handle in different ways, but yeah, bottling it up, the shame and the guilt of like how it makes other people feel,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and that cycle. But it's great that that you took some action last year, and especially that your family is so supportive.
Yeah.
That kind of definitely bodes well. All these things kind of bode well for the future,
For
as you
sure.
take over the classical musical world. Cool. Well, yeah, Alexandra. Yeah, thanks again for coming on. It's been great been talking.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Alexandra. That interview was a few months ago, so I hope you've had a chance to safely and quietly get back on stage, or hopefully it's coming soon. If you liked this episode, don't forget to leave a quick review or just hit the 5 stars wherever you listen to this podcast. Music, as always, is by Moby. And until next week, wishing you peace and quiet.